So I've played and reviewed the first two Mafia Definitive Editions, Mafia and Mafia 2. Both I really enjoyed. Personally, I do prefer Mafia mainly due to the storytelling. I loved it. But also Mafia 2's Definitive Edition did have a little disadvantage because it wasn't the same remake. In fact, it wasn't a remake at all. It was more of a remaster with improved visuals and better performance. I mentioned it and of course went into more detail in my review, whereas Mafia Definitive Edition was a full remake from the ground up, where they completely made a new version of the game that just followed the same story, but the new visuals and world design was incredible. So just like Mafia 2, the definitive version of Mafia 3, which did release back in 2016, is also only a remaster that looks slightly better. And I can understand it because I don't think a 2016 game needs a full remake. Mafia 2, however, was 2010, so I think it's sort of due. And maybe it will happen one day, who knows. So to finish off the Mafia trilogy, I played Mafia 3 Definitive Edition. Now I already was aware going into this game that it was the most disliked out of the series. Unfortunately, when the new version released, it did have a lot of issues in terms of performance, and this was one of the biggest issues. Lots of bugs and FPS problems, but also the original was already a turn off for some fans of the whole series because they seemed to have way less focus on the story and more so the open world. I think a lot of people didn't feel like it was a true Mafia game, and I was quite intrigued to see what they did change from the previous games, but also because I love the idea of a 1960s America setting. There's not a ton of games that do have it set in this era, so in terms of the narrative, we follow the new protagonist of Lincoln Clay, who's a Vietnam War veteran who's just returned home, and the whole idea is him on a revenge path against the Italian Mafia who killed his adopted family, more specifically the Black Mob. That's the main plot and what makes the story. But with the setting of the late 60s, the story addresses the many issues of racial equality in this time, which had a big impact on what life was like, of course, and the government. So the story involves many flashbacks and the news, with a lot of documentary style cutscenes, which was different, sort of with people talking to the camera and commenting on events. It's interesting and hasn't been done in the series before, or definitely not as prominent. Some might like it, others not so much. As mentioned, the style of the game takes away from that true Mafia feeling that we got, but then again, not only is it later on so it won't feel exactly the same, but also it's clear they wanted to try something different and not just have the same story of someone starting from nowhere to becoming a Mafia boss, just with a different character. We'd seen it before, so overall I still enjoyed this story, and the writing isn't bad at all, just don't expect a similar narrative to the other Mafias. I'd also like to state the voice acting in the main characters, not just Lincoln. I believe they did a great job and sort of threw me off. I wasn't really expecting it from this game, so that's definitely a bonus. It immerses you in and seems so realistic as well. The mouth movement and animations are good. I'll talk more about visuals later. So as stated, Lincoln's main drive is revenge and hunting down these people that killed his family, which does mean the story missions themselves involve you going after them and being ordered to take down a target after being informed about some criminal activity in a certain district from another NPC character, which is what sets up the mission. But the goal is to achieve a certain amount of damage most of the time to complete them, and then you take down a target after that. This isn't anything we haven't seen before, and some games do it right because the freedom is in your hands on how you want to go about the mission, and you do have a lot of experimentation in how you want to take down this target. Mainly open worlds and tactical shooters do it best, but with Mafia 3 it's kind of hard because not only is it a small action adventure style, but the fact that it's almost every single mission and it all feels so similar, just constantly repeating the same formula over and over, it does become repetitive, I can't lie, compared to the other games which I really enjoyed. Now the gameplay itself and how it feels is of course going to be quite similar to the other entries, no drastic changes. I do see a difference in animations and shooting mechanics. They are more involved and I suppose realistic, with it being a newer release. Also, a big aspect I noticed and what ties in with this repetitive gameplay is that the gameplay feels really easy even on high difficulty, whereas the tactical shooter games, for example, there's more to the gameplay and the enemies put up more of a fight, which makes that same repeated formula actually fun and varied. I don't know, I just think compared to Mafia and Mafia 2, the missions were so much more exciting and involved, and this repetitive gameplay was another huge complaint when it released. You'd be pleased to know that the performance has been improved since the launch, in terms of glitches, that's for sure. It's by no means perfect, I did experience some FPS drops, and I know for a lot of players they weren't getting near enough the same FPS, but it's still smooth and feels fine. The melee takedowns and stealth mechanics are pretty good. It includes brutal takedowns, which are very brutal and help to stun nearby enemies. There's great use of cover and implementing the environment. As I said, the animations are improved from what I remember. Then when you're in the middle of a brawl, you can counter and perform various moves. Nothing major, but it seems they have focus on stealth, as well as the stealth movement and covering. It feels fluid to move across to a point and switch cover, and adding on to the gameplay, the gunplay feels feels very smooth and not clunky in any way. You have a big variety of weapons to test out, just like in Mafia 2. The same selection we sort of are used to, with various handguns, rifles, shotguns, auto weapons like SMGs, of course the classic Tommy gun. There's also a few special weapons they've included, one being an RPG which was cool, plus some DLC guns. The equipment is near enough the same as well. You'll find the typical Mafia throwables with some more modern ones because it's set later down the line. There's Molotovs, frags, C4s, tox mines, throwing knives, lure grenades, etc. And an aspect I love in all the games in the Mafia series is the driving mechanics and vehicles. They all feel so natural to control, rather than them having no weight to them and no leeway when turning or accelerating. The different models vary a lot in how they feel to drive, and of course they look great. As I mentioned, this 1960s America era is one of my favourites, and a huge part of that is the car models. So many lowriders, you know, Mustangs, Thunderbirds, Cadillacs, etc. all with such slick designs to them, and Mafia 3 killed this representation. And I think that's where I end my review of Mafia 3 Definitive Edition in 2024. Although it had issues as covered, and I believe the other two games are superior, I would still recommend the game now for anyone who is considering it and likes the franchise. Just don't expect a true Mafia game, which I knew it wouldn't be before, due to the later setting and the complaints I heard with the changes they made. But overall, I didn't mind the game and I had a good time playing it, and that goes with the entire series, and now it's complete. So if you did enjoy this video, then let me know by tapping that like button below, and if you're a fan of single player and story driven games, then that's what this channel is all about. With the odd multiplayer title, I have reviews on a bunch of games, with a playlist of a series I've done in the description. If you'd like to support the channel by becoming a member at either level 1 or 2 to gain access to many perks, then click the join button below, or there will also be a link in the description. Thank you all for the support and watching until the very end. That was Mafia 3 Definitive Edition, and bye bye.